Here we go. Hey, welcome everyone, and welcome back from. I hope you guys had a good Thanksgiving and holiday break. I know we did, and we're ready to get back in it with another episode of the Wrestling Roundtable. Tonight, we're gonna try to fit it all into one, but if not, we may have to split it into a couple. But we're gonna discuss the famous. Since we last time we talked about the Montreal Screwjob, we're gonna follow up with kind of was starting to happen around the same time, but ultimately took off after the screw job, really. And that's the Monday Night Wars and the creation of the Attitude Era, the creation of, the realism of the NWO and all that stuff. So, to be honest, I didn't really watch wrestling that much before all this started happening. I watched maybe, I keep forgetting.
Subliminal messaging.
Yeah. Let's start it off. I got some green tea fused with honey and blueberries.
I got the old Pepsi.
Oh, it tastes gross. It tastes healthy.
So yes, it's gross.
Yeah.
You don't get these guns by eating healthy. This is like Otis, body by steak, baby.
Right. But like I said, when I was younger, I didn't really watch a lot of wrestling. I mean, I did watch a little bit of WWF, like In Your House, and I played the video games, like the cool arcade style ones where like Undertaker would hit you with a tombstone, like a literal
My favorite was WrestleMania on Nintendo 64. Because that's when they first got into creative characters. And I'd sit there for hours just creating characters.
I will say that my favorite game back then for the N64 was WCW versus NWO.
That was a good one, too.
I
remember going down to the Captain Video and renting that like all the time.
Yeah, I do too. It was fantastic. But that's that's a little bit of an intro that I had to wrestling. I went to a few live shows, like dark matches and stuff, but I didn't really was into it that much. I guess maybe it was because the characters. I wasn't much of a character wrestler follower, if that makes any sense.
We're the same age, but me and you grew up on two different eras of wrestling. Because I got started super early in life when it was more character based, and then you started when it was more realism based.
Yeah.
So I like both sides, but you grew up on the realism based.
Yeah. That's kind of what attracted me to it. But that's not to say that I haven't gone back and watched that stuff. Someone
but that's what drew you in at the first place.
Yeah. The Hulk Hogan signing and all that stuff. That kind of drew me over to WCW, and it was fresh. It was something new, and I was tired of WWF and their characters and stuff. So I watched WCW, and then what really kept me going on or going with WCW is when they did the most genius storyline ever, and that's the start of The Outsiders, where that's where we get our podcast name is more of a tribute to them, not a ripoff, just more of a homage paying to him, because I'm a huge Kevin Nash fan and I love Scott Hall too. But
Kevin Nash was just cool. He's just 7 foot of cool.
I actually got as you can see, I have a big pop. Oh, there we go. I have a big pop collection. This is not even half of it. This is basically my back stock, my doubles and stuff. The ones I actually have displayed in my living room, I have an autographed Diesel pop and then an autographed Razor Ramon and a couple of other ones.
And if you guys have heard the story on the podcast like 1,000 times, Kevin Nash retweeted John one time.
I will never let anyone forget that.
You're gonna always find a way to segue into that.
Well, I'm glad you got it out of the way, so I didn't have to say it and bring it
exactly.
up. You never know who's watching for the first time. They need to know how famous I am.
Yeah, but then we got our regular guy. Here goes John telling the freaking retweet by Kevin Nash story again.
If we ever make T-shirts, it's that's what it's going to say. Kevin Nash retweeted me.
Yeah. And then I'm gonna have my kerfuffle shirt.
That's perfect. But yeah, getting back to it, Hulk Hogan going over, that attracted me to it. And then they did the most genius thing ever, and they broke the bank to get Hall and Nash, gave him a guaranteed contract, which was unheard of at the time until Hogan got one. They gave him creative control, and they gave him literally half. They cut their days on the road in half from 300
from 360, like 350 something dates to like 180 or something.
Yeah, something like that. I was thinking like 120 or something like the story.
Yeah, I think it was like 180, but anyway, it was like a significantly lower amount.
Yeah, it was about half. So they got more money. It was guaranteed no matter what. And then they got creative control, and they cut their time on the road in half. So you cannot beat that. Even Vince, from the interviews with Nash and stuff, Vince even said that it was a good contract and to take it because Vince couldn't match that at the time.
No,
so
they were doing you got to think back in those days, WCW wasn't doing live shows. They weren't doing house shows. They were doing live TV, but they weren't doing house shows. So they weren't doing, like in WWF, you had your A cities, which were your television towns, and you had your B cities, which were just your regular house live events. WCW wasn't doing that. They were just doing TV. And if they did have an occasional, when they started doing house shows, everybody was based out of either Atlanta or Florida.
Yeah.
They would do house shows in the Southeast region.
Yeah, they were recording the Nitro and stuff.
I don't know if you guys realize this, because John, you're segueing into it now. This is now the gun show. I don't,
I'm just getting hot. But I got my Shawn Michaels.
We've turned this into the Wrestling Roundtable gun show.
I don't have guns like you do, but I'm pretty proud of the show.
You'll grow up one day.
Need to eat my vegetables.
But I think that was one of the biggest things that drew them to that, was because WCW was more of a regional promotion at the time. Yeah. They were, Turner was based out of Atlanta. And so they would work around Atlanta, Florida, Nashville. They never really went further than like Texas, because all their special main event stuff, like their big, like Bash at the Beach and everything, was out of like Daytona and Panama City. And they stayed in that Southeast region. Now they would go to Sturgis, but you never really seen them in the Northeast territories. You never seen them out west. They mainly stayed in that Southeast region. So the traveling was cut down. So the days on the road were cut down. You didn't have all the live events, so that cut down. So you're going to make more money. You're going to work less, and you're not going to have to travel that far from home. That's a win-win situation.
Yeah. And then after Hogan, obviously, Nash and Hall came over, like we said. And that's when it really started drawing me in, because they were really the best part about wrestling, and it's really hard to do nowadays, but the best matches are the ones that suspend your belief for just a half second. If you can just believe what's going on is an actual feud or whatever, these guys actually feel this way, then it's a quality match, in my opinion. And as a kid, or not a kid, I was like a younger teenager or whatever. That it was more believable because that was something new at the time. Kayfabe was still a thing. I mean, it was kind of getting broken a little bit, but at the same time, it was still really protected.
You still had that belief in the back of your mind.
Yeah, exactly. So Hall and Nash coming over, it didn't feel like they were signed. I mean, obviously they were, but it didn't feel like they were invited there. It just feels like they just showed up and they just wanted to, take over everything.
Well, that whole promo was smart when you brought Hall in through the crowd, and then he said, "You know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here."
Yeah.
And that's what started the whole class action lawsuit that Vince McMahon did against WCW, because they made it sound like WWE or WWF at the time was trying to invade WCW, which was a smart writing part on WCW. That was smart writing on them. So it took your WWE people and go, "Did y'all hear WWE or WWF is trying to take over WCW and they're sending their guys in to infiltrate," So it was a smart play on their part.
Yeah, and they dropped their personas, they dropped their characters, and that's when you really got familiar with these guys, and it got personable because they were no longer Diesel and Razor Ramon. It was Kevin Nash and Scott Hall.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty cool. And they kept showing up, kept creating havoc, kept stealing the show week after week. And then obviously came the big turn, and that just hooked me. When Hulk Hogan,
probably the smartest thing that nobody ever thought about doing.
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan is the super baby face.
Yeah.
Turn him heel. Okay.
Yeah. And that started like a precedent for, Stone Cold turning heel, or now Roman Reigns turning heel, things like that. Those big turns.
They should have done to John Cena 15 years ago.
All those people. Yeah. I was waiting for that, and we never got it. So I'm disappointed. It really would have rejuvenated his career. It really would have.
Oh, absolutely.
Brandon said the sun must be out. See some guns.
Hell yeah.
I put a sweatshirt on.
Out, baby.
It's hot. It's definitely, the sun's not out here in Colorado. It's cold as hell. So
it's 40-something degrees here in Tennessee, so it's cold for us.
I still got snow on the ground outside. But yeah, just the heel turn of Hogan and the start of the NWO, and they didn't quite in the beginning they didn't know where to go with it. They were still finding their way, I guess I should say. They knew where they wanted to go, but it was still fresh and they were green at it. And Hogan was bad at being a heel in the beginning because he'd never been one before, in my opinion.
Boy, did he learn quick.
Yeah, it was awkward, but in the beginning, but he did learn quick. And then obviously Hall and Nash backing him up after they were already creating havoc and being the badasses at the time that they were. That kind of fit in perfectly, and calling themselves the New World Order, and then shorten it to NWO. It was something catchy. It was great. And it was, I almost wish they would have just kept it to that 3-man group. We'll get to that later, but, and then so that drew me in, because there was so much realism up to the fact where Chad and I were talking earlier. There's an episode where NWO attacks the rest of the WCW roster outside, hitting people with baseball bats, and Kevin Nash threw Rey Mysterio like a dart into the side of the trailer. It was to the fact that
you hear Larry Zbyszko when he's doing commentary go, he just threw him like a lawn dart.
Yeah, and true story, the fans believed it so much, and we were talking about suspending that belief just for a little bit. That's what makes great moments. The fans actually called 911, and in an interview with Kevin Nash, he said that they stayed in character, but they were all wondering like what the hell was going on because they didn't rehearse that. They didn't know that was coming on, but it was a true story. Like, it was actual ambulance coming because people reported that those guys were getting beat up in the parking lot. And then after that, obviously Goldberg started becoming a thing. And I think I really like the idea. People love undefeated streaks, like Taker's streak, Goldberg's streak. People love to root for that, to keep that going. And I think that was a genius move. And I think Goldberg eventually became somebody that was believable to be that unstoppable person. But in the beginning, he was not up to standard to do something like that. His matches were rough. They had to cut him to like 5 or 10 minutes because he was getting winded and he just couldn't wrestle at all.
They were cutting him down to 60 seconds.
Yeah.
Just the spear jackhammer.
Right. I mean, it was kind of a genius move in order to build up this like unstoppable force of a character and make him undefeated. So it was kind of genius the way that they were hiding him. Hiding his downfalls, that was actually increasing his popularity. But then there's matches where it's just, you could see it, like against William Regal.
He make him look stupid.
Brandon said, I think everyone in my near family has been speared in jackhammer. Yeah, I think we've all been there. In football, that was the type of spear we all tried to give each other in tackling drills. And so we had that match with William Regal, and William Regal just mopped the floor with him, even though he did the job for him. He still blew up Goldberg. Blowing them up means he winded him. He just completely out wrestled him. And then there's the infamous sidekick that ended Bret Hart's career. He wasn't ready at that time, but still, it was a phenomenal thing, and that built up a good rivalry between the NWO and Goldberg. And the way they ended the streak kept Goldberg strong and made the NWO. It gave them even more heat with Scott Hall coming in with the stun gun. Still to this day, I don't know how they did that without it being real, because they showed it and it was like sparking, and it made sound. Yeah, unless there was a separate button for just the sound. Like, I don't know. It seems like it was a real stun gun. But anyway, again, suspending belief. But that was a really cool thing that they did. Just everything that they did was original. They were using that realism, and it was really drawing people in. And that they were starting to beat WWF so bad for a really long time.
82 weeks.
Yeah. It was ridiculous. But at the same time, and history has shown, Vince does his best work when he's under pressure. And when he's not under pressure, some of the worst times in WWE was like, the PG era and the ruthless aggression era, and it was just real corny. Thankfully that they still had people to kind of bring that nastiness, like Batista and like heel Kurt Angle, and Triple H came in some. The Rock was there. Yeah, so they still had some things to keep it interesting, but overall it was just underwhelming because they were pushing John Cena, and he's like Hulk Hogan. He had 5 moves and that was it.
Yeah.
Towards the end of his career, he started adding a big repertoire, like a springboard stunner and all that stuff. He just looks awkward doing that, like real stiff, because he's got so much muscle. But anyway, it was just it was putting pressure on WWE, and I think just like capitalism in general, when you have competition, it breeds success. So for fans, it was a win-win. You can turn on WCW and see amazing stuff going on with NWO and Goldberg and DDP and all that other stuff that they were doing over there. Or you can watch WWF and or WWE, whatever, and see what was happening as far as the growth of what was slowly becoming the Attitude Era. And we'll get to WCW's downfall in a little bit, but to jump over to the beginning of the Attitude Era, it was great. The Attitude Era, in my opinion, is the greatest time in pro wrestling. And I've seen the territory days now. I've seen WCW and the NWO's time. I've seen, AEW start up and all that other stuff. But I still believe that the Attitude Era was the funnest time to be a wrestling fan. Best storylines. But yeah, it started spawning the real Stone Cold Steve Austin. Well, not the real, but you know what I mean, like the actual Stone Cold, not the Stunning Steve, not the 316 that just beat Jake the Snake, not the First Blood match with Bret Hart, not that kind of Stone Cold, but the actual Texas Rattlesnake, the bionic redneck, the beer drinking, flip offing, even that's cussing, all that stuff. Just a badass dude. And then The Rock came in at the right time, and started with the Nation, and that got a lot of heat just because of what it represented. And I loved it. I thought to this, now that I look back on it, it was genius. And then that started their feud over the Intercontinental title and all that stuff. Then DX happened, and DX was like one of the best things to happen to WWF. It sucks that Shawn Michaels' career had to take a back seat, but it was, put up or shut up for Triple H at that time to see if he could actually carry a faction, because at that point Shawn was the leader. Triple H was just the funny man in the corner.
Well, the thing is, Shawn had to take time off. He was in a bad spot. Plus, he had hurt his back in that casket match. So it was time, like you said, it was time for him to go off for a little bit and get right, and then see if Triple H could prove himself, which obviously he did. So.
Yeah, he did. I mean, it was sink or swim, and it was for everybody. I mean, if you listen to interviews from everybody during that time, it wasn't like it was today or like it is today, as far as it being kind of like political and Vince just like handpicks people and just kind of tries things out. It was dog eat dog in that locker room, and who could do the best promos, who could do the best in-ring work. All that stuff. And those people, and at that time, Vince let them improvise a lot. He doesn't do that anymore because they're, publicly traded. So now they're held to higher standards. So everything's got to be checked off first. And that's taken away from wrestling. But anyway, but it was dog eat dog. These guys had to swim or they were going to sink and then be out, and someone else was going to take their place. And again, competition breeds success. So not only did it breed success between the companies, and they started taking their product up to a new level, trying to outdo each other, but the people inside the promotions were also trying to get on top, because that spot was open because Bret left. Shawn had to take a break. So, I mean, it was really, if you think about it at the time, those Triple H being a more serious character, more of a leader, The Rock becoming his own, like not just being part of the Nation, but kind of surpassing Farouk and being the face of the Nation. Stone Cold was just getting started, and his feud with The Rock and stuff like that. That was,
Stone Cold's feud with Vince McMahon was a big part of that. Everybody, they loved that because everybody wanted to go into the office and flip their boss off and punch him in the head and all that stuff. Well, you were living vicariously through him because he was just sticking it to the man, sticking it to the boss.
Yeah, I think that is what officially catapulted the WWF into the forefront, is when Vince and Stone Cold started feuding, because it was the establishment against the blue collar. No matter what Vince did to try to screw Austin over, Austin just kept coming back and, flipping him off, giving him a stunner, shooting beer out of a beer truck, fire hose. But, it sparked some really good rivalries all around, and we can give stories about all the different types of rivalries, like DX versus the Nation, and DX coming out in blackface and making fun of the Nation. That would not fly today, but it was pretty hilarious. And
The
I
Rock
say,
just come out of the bathroom and smell what the Rock is cooking.
I only laugh at it because everyone else on the Nation side thought it was hilarious and that it was a great deal. Mark Henry, and when he saw X-Pac dressed as himself, Mark Henry said he was laughing so hard. And that big fat suit and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was classic. So the Nation versus DX, Steve Austin versus McMahon, The Rock versus Steve Austin back when the Intercontinental title meant something.
The Ministry of Darkness.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Ministry of Darkness, the Brood, how Edge got started. I mean that just spawned a lot of great people. Mankind was already in during the character stage, but he made his character a little bit more realistic at that point, a little bit more personable. Then, of course, you know, the infamous Hell in a Cell match kind of cemented Mick Foley into our hearts as somebody that we respected as a wrestler from everything he was putting his body through.
Yeah.
And I know I'm jumping around, but just all those moments like DX declaring war on WCW and driving that tank up to the door.
Yeah.
Kevin Nash actually, when he got interviewed about that, they were and Chris Jericho and stuff. They were actually standing on the other side of the door trying to get the door up because because they wanted to call their bluff, and you know, once they let them in, they couldn't really do anything. Like they weren't going to shoot people and all that stuff. So it was a blessing for DX that they didn't let them in because it gave them the upper hand. If they would have opened their gates, then they would have killed it instantly.
Yeah.
So they were peeking through the window trying to get the door open and stuff like that. At least that's what they say. So, but I'm glad they didn't because it made for really good TV.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. And then the skit where they read that that letter from the broadcast
CDC or the FCC or whatever.
About the words they couldn't say and all that stuff, and they just ended up saying all of them. They just bleeped it out. It was fantastic. You know, Stone Cold getting strung up on a cross and stuff like that.
Stephanie McMahon getting strung up on one.
Yeah. You know, Triple H roofing Stephanie and marrying her at a drive-thru in Vegas. Like all this stuff you couldn't do today. You know, the Inferno match, the First Blood matches, the Hell in the Cells that, like, you know, Taker throwing Mankind off of them.
The 550 million bra and panty matches. I'm sure the women's division's happy that crap's over.
Yeah. And one of the thing that we haven't mentioned yet, but one of the things that was really a staple was the Kane versus Undertaker storyline. When Kane first appeared and he ripped the door off the cage, and like you really felt that, and you were like,
you're like, who's this monster just rip a steel door?
When I was younger, that just kind of stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then that's when I started watching WWF. Like they won for me at that point. They got me. Yeah. And I did watch I still watch WCW because that's when Sting got his black and white face paint. By the way, Sting is now back again in AEW. He made an appearance. He hadn't said anything yet. He just kind of walked through the ring and kind of looked around and stuff. This week, he's supposed to be actually making a statement or an appearance and doing a promo or whatever. So we'll see what he has to say. Sting hasn't always been the best on the mic.
He will not be doing any wrestling.
Yeah.
He will not be doing any wrestling.
I don't understand what he's doing.
He's got a multi-year contract with AEW that says he doesn't take any bumps.
Well, he can't.
Well, yeah, he can't. But also, he's 61 years old.
Yeah. But he's, you know, after that buckle bomb from Seth Rollins, like he just completely killed
he's got spinal stenosis, which is the narrowing of the spinal column. But
yeah,
it's going to be cool to see him back on TV again and as a regular character. The only thing is, it's going to be cool for a couple weeks. It's going to get stale, and where are they going to go from there?
thing's gonna have to interfere with baseball bats and do scorpion death locks because that's about all he can do. He's not a great
He can't
talker.
even do a scorpion death drop because he can't bump.
Yeah. He's never been like super great on promos. The thing that made him good is his work. He was the strong silent type. Yeah, so, you know, I would flip over back and forth. Like I was truly caught in the middle. And then eventually, you know, what led to WCW's downfall is everyone got creative control and nobody wanted to lose to one another. And then everyone wanted to be in the NWO because it was cool. Like even backstage for them, like they were the cool kids. They had their own dressing room and stuff like that. They just ran the show. And with Hulk Hogan in your group, like you can't lose because he's not gonna put anybody over.
Not with his creative control.
Yeah. So everybody just started joining the NWO, and it was just kind of comical and empty at that point because like every week someone else would turn in the middle of the match and be part of the NWO. And then it got so big, it had to split up into two promotions, NWO Hollywood, NWO Wolfpack, the red and black and the white and black. And they were feuding with each other instead of, you know, taking on WCW anymore. Goldberg had lost his streak. One of the things that kept it interesting and hilarious is Chris Jericho and Dean Malenko with the 1,001 holes. And that big ass list, he would like read this big ass like 10-foot list on this piece of printed out paper. It was hilarious. But I mean, eventually they lost Chris Jericho too. And he showed up on Raw's Jericho, and him and The Rock giving those side by side promos on Stephanie McMahon. They were fantastic. It was just really fun time to be a wrestling fan during the Attitude Era. They had a lot of serious stuff going on, but they also had hilarious things going on as well. They were just pushing the envelope on everything. But by that time, Triple H had become head of DX. They got the Outlaws, Road Dogg, Jesse James, and Badass Billy Gunn. And I think that elevated their team to a higher level because they were entertaining. Road Dogg was great at talking, you know, kind of rhyming, not rapping, but just he was great at talking. Billy Gunn, you know, was
great wrestler.
Yeah, he was a great wrestler, great finisher in my opinion at that time. I know Dolph Ziggler wears it out now, but when Billy Gunn hit that,
Dolph Ziggler steals everybody's shit.
Dolph Ziggler is like a blend of Mr. Perfect, Badass Billy Gunn, and Rick Rude. Yeah, and Shawn Michaels because he does a super kick every
Yeah, but
match.
who doesn't do a super kick now?
Yeah, well, Kevin Owens is pretty sick though. He's a good super kick. Kevin Owens
like that. I do a super kick too.
He's like the epitome of the Attitude Era now. He does the stunner. He does a super kick. You know, he does a frog splash, the bullfrog.
Yeah, the bullfrog splash. The pop-up power bomb.
Right. You know, anyway, back to, we're kind of getting off track like usual. But yeah, just those things, they grew and grew and got better. And then Shawn Michaels came back, and it was like a full DX all over again. Yeah. But it had Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and then the Outlaws. X-Pac, I never really cared for. Like he never excited me. The Bronco Buster was not like, it wasn't as funny to me as it is to everyone else, I guess.
Oh, and then, by the way, when he was doing the Bronco Buster in an indie show one time, he tore his butthole.
Oh yeah, I remember hearing that story.
The buckle was exposed, and he caught a little piece of metal right in the booty hole, and it.
That was awful. That is awful.
It's pretty terrible.
And the X Factor wasn't really a good finisher in my opinion. Just kick him and just face plant him. But
also, they had a faction called the X. I think it was the X Factor. It was him and Albert. Look up their entrance music. It is the worst entrance music that's ever been made. It was done by Uncle Craig. That's all I need to say. Please put that in your Google machine and ask it.
the guy that played Albert like has had some terrible characters. Prince Albert, like
Mhm.
he literally had piercings all
Tensai.
over his body. Yeah, Tensai. He danced sometimes with the Funkadactyls and stuff.
Yeah, tons of funk.
He's had some ridiculous ass characters over the
But he
years.
is the head trainer of the Performance Center now, or excuse me, the what is it, the Global Wrestling Center or whatever now.
Yeah. But yeah, eventually WCW couldn't afford to pay their people because they weren't generating enough money because it was just getting stale. They were writing themselves into a corner. Nobody wanted to lose to anybody else. They watered it down by making the NWO just accessible to everybody. Um, and eventually it just they just ran out of steam, quite frankly, in every aspect, financially, creatively, all that stuff. And they were losing people at that point. DDP came over, Chris Jericho came over, stuff like
Well,
that.
I think the biggest downfall for WCW was they got too caught up in the ratings wars. When you're doing Goldberg versus Hulk Hogan at the Georgia Dome on live or on free TV,
Yeah.
you're leaving money on the table for pay-per-views. So WWE, WWF at the time was still focused mainly on their pay-per-views. That's where they made most of their money. WCW didn't care. As long as they were beating WWF in the ratings, they didn't care about pay-per-views. 90% of their pay-per-views were garbage because they did all the big hype matches on Nitro, which was free. You could have, if you would have took 3 or 4 weeks to hype up Goldberg versus Hogan at the Georgia Dome, they would have filled the Georgia Dome and probably sold 25 to 30 million pay-per-views.
Yeah.
And I mean, Vince, that was their biggest downfall.
Yeah, and Vince has always been smart financially.
Absolutely.
As far as the marketing, the merch, sales, like he was making all types of merchandise. He can, action figures, foam hands, t-shirts, hats, sunglasses, all types of stuff.
The only merch WCW had was NWO stuff.
Yeah.
And Sting's masks.
Yeah, mask, NWO shirts, and DDP shirts, something like that.
Yeah.
And
the Monday Night was it Monday Night Jericho instead of Monday Night Nitro?
Yeah, and then it became Raw's Jericho.
Yeah.
But Vince has kind of kept that same thing today. It's just and it's kind of boring, but I guess you kind of have to do it to make money. But all the shows are nowadays is just 4 weeks of buildup, and then nothing really happens that much. And then they do a pay-per-view, and that's where a title could change or not. And now we lost Chad. But even then, sometimes the title just depends on the pay-per-view. There's the big 4 in WWF: the SummerSlam, Royal Rumble, the Survivor Series, and WrestleMania, of course. So if it's close to any one of those big 4, the previous 1 or 2 pay-per-views are kind of going to be irrelevant unless they need to make a change and start a feud to build up to one of those bigger shows instead of making the feud, a little bit more flat with smaller name people or something. But other than that, they just usually keep the belt in the champion's hands until one of those big pay-per-views, and then they'll do transfer of the titles. So it does kind of get a little boring, but it also makes the pay-per-views worth watching. But that's where they make their money for sure. There you go. You back.
A little connection issue there. We're good.
I heard you moving around. I don't know if you heard me at all, but just talking about the pay-per-view format, how the 4 weeks building up to the pay-per-view were just basically storytelling, and even some of the pay-per-views are just a segue to one of the big four sometimes. So, or unless you're Brock Lesnar, you show up 3 times a year.
Yeah.
But
that was one thing that WCW didn't really have. Starcade was supposed to be their like WrestleMania.
Yeah.
But they just didn't hype it like WWE did Mania. And they kind of watered down a lot of stuff. They had so many pay-per-views. They had Halloween Havoc. They had Starcade. They had Bash at the Beach.
Hog Wild at Sturgis.
Hog Wild and Sturgis, yeah. It was so many different, the Great American Bash.
Yeah.
So a lot of that stuff's getting reused now because WWE owns the rights to it. But I don't know. They just didn't really focus. They didn't have a big four major like you do, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, Royal Rumble.
Mm-hmm.
Those are synonymous. You could name all 4 of those off and know exactly what I'm talking about. You can't name 4 huge pay-per-views for WCW.
No,
they were too focused on free TV.
Yeah. I mean, I can't name year in and year out big pay-per-views, but I can name some big pay-per-views that they had during that time, like the sold out one, the Bash at the Beach, Hogan against Sting, things like that.
The Bash at the Beach where Hogan turned heel.
Yeah.
And then Starcade where it was Sting's first match back in the black and white in 96 it was 97 Starcade.
Yeah.
Where for 18 months Sting didn't say anything.
Yeah, and his face paint progressively got better.
Yeah. Yeah, it started out really crappy, then really good.
He had like a soccer mom haircut and terrible face paint, and then eventually his hair got longer and his face paint got better.
He looked like the Ultimate Warrior the first time he did it, and then it just progressively gotten better. Yeah,
he looked like it was emo.
Yeah, if it listened to My Chemical Romance,
right? Exactly. Hold on. They did have a major Super Brawl. They always hyped it until Super Brawl 9. Yeah. I mean, I guess that you're right on that.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that they did stop hyping it after 9 just proves the point. Like we forgot about it. We don't really consider it a big one now. So
War Games used to be really big, but now NXT's taken that over, and actually War Games is going on right now.
Yeah.
But War Games in the late 80s, early 90s was really big. And then they kind of went away with it. I don't remember the last War Games. I'll have to look it up on the network. But that could have been something they really could use.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't. I mean.
Yeah, that's true. Make it kind of like the Royal Rumble type thing. But instead of exactly. People on the top rope, just make it like pinfall or something.
Yeah.
But then that gave rise to even more envelope pushing on WWF's part with the Godfather and his hose, basically a porn star with Val Venus, the hardcore title, which was insane. The hardcore title was so entertaining for so long.
Yeah.
It's like the 24/7 belt nowadays, but like on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
And it led to some fantastic matches, just fantastic. Most of them with Mankind, or Hardcore Holly or something.
Crash like Holly.
Yeah, and Crash. Oh my gosh, he used a weight scale, like an actual those big.
He said he was a super heavyweight and weighed over 300 pounds, and he had a scale to prove it.
Like you always walk to the ring with it over his shoulder, like this big old school doctor's scale that you stood on. It's hilarious.
That would suck to be your gimmick. You have to carry a scale to the ring. Like that gummit.
That weighs probably as much as you do. He was probably like all of 5'9" or some crap like that.
Yeah, he was probably 5'8", $125 or something like that.
Looking like a fake Eminem. Fake Slim Shady. But yeah, and then Sexual Chocolate with Mark Henry and young. And then the Dudley boys came. Then the Hardys versus Edge and Christian versus the Dudleys, the tables, ladders, and chairs match, or the infamous ladder match, where Edge spears Jeff Hardy off the when he's holding on to the belt. Yeah. I mean, they were just pushing the envelope. Oh my gosh, just so many matches, like Kurt Angle and Shane McMahon at King of the Ring, when Kurt Angle threw Shane through 2 panes of glass.
Yeah,
and ended up falling on his head and getting a concussion. Kurt Angle's bleeding from the actual glass. It was it's some of the most memorable matches. Unfortunately, around that time, Owen Hart had joined the Nation, which number one didn't fit, in my opinion. That was just an awful booking. But then Owen Hart, did a pile driver and dropped Steve on his neck or on his head, and it hurt his neck. And he had to take time off. And like Shawn Michaels, he had his demons to deal with because he was, medicating with alcohol and stuff like that. And he was just in a real bad place. But that gave rise to – it was kind of a blessing in disguise. I mean, I wish Steve didn't get hurt because it shortened his career on the back end, and that was a terrible thing. But it did give time for WWE to have to fill in that gap, and then that's when your lower card people like Triple H and stuff like that, they had to elevate themselves to main event status.
And that's when The Rock kind of broke away from the Nation and became The Rock,
Yeah.
The Rock that we know now.
Yeah, and Undertaker stepped up his game because that's what he does. It was just it wasn't, I hate to say it, necessary evil, but overall it did good for the company because they didn't have Stone Cold to crutch on anymore.
If you look at it that way, Owen Hart's the reason The Rock's a movie star.
I mean, it's true. I mean, in a weird way, that is true. He's the reason for a lot of people getting the spotlight and becoming who they were, or who they are today, or who we remember them as. Tonight NXT. Yeah, well, I haven't seen the War Games yet. I can only assume it's pretty decent. Don't spoil it for me, but
we'll be watching it tonight when I get off of here. We're coming off of a holiday, so we didn't do the pay-per-view tonight. So
I'm a big fan of Undisputed Era and the brand. Pat McAfee is the ultimate fan. Like, he's what every one of us want to be. He's a big wrestling fan, and he's got a chance to wrestle the main events. But props to him because he actually is pretty decent at wrestling right now. So, but yeah, thanks for the comment. Where were we? So all that, again, that necessity, it was sink or swim, and the cream rose to the top.
Cream always rises to the top.
Exactly. Chris Jericho had to step his game up. All those people.
Yeah.
Then he wins the first undisputed title from Stone Cold and The Rock when Stone Cold came back. But yeah, even those WrestleManias were just classic. Rock versus Austin, all that stuff.
And Stone Cold versus Shawn Michaels in '98, the last, that's the big WrestleMania where he kind of broke out and became the star.
Well, that's when Shawn dropped the title and he had to take time off.
That was the Tyson WrestleMania when Mike Tyson showed up.
And Taker was actually waiting in Gorilla, that back room where before they came out the entrance, he was taping up his fist because he didn't know. Shawn Michaels was so unpredictable at that point with all his pills and alcohol and stuff and his bad attitude. Some of them were really unsure that Shawn business title. They were afraid that he was just going to walk out and take time off being the champion. So Undertaker was really legit sitting in the back room in Gorilla, taping his fist up, getting ready, because if Shawn didn't drop the belt to Steve, he was going to whip his ass as soon as he came to the backstage area.
Yeah.
And
he
there's a
said he was
funny,
going to beat the hell out of him and then drag him back to the ring so Stone Cold could pin him.
yeah, that would have been crazy. Speaking of breaking kayfabe,
Do what?
I said, speaking of breaking kayfabe, that
I
would
know,
be.
right? That would.
I
I
mean,
would love to have seen that.
yeah, that'd have been hilarious. But that ultimately would have ruined Shawn Michaels, though. So.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it was a really influential time on wrestling, and it showed what people like to see and what really excited people, because they were targeting, you know, teenagers to 30-year-old men.
Mm-hmm.
But what they didn't expect was how popular it was with women. Because of the Val Venus character, Triple H and Shawn Michaels wearing thongs in the ring, Shawn Michaels doing girl, you know, all that stuff. I mean, it you know, D-Generation X in general like attracted women to the arena. It was very, how they won was shock and awe factor, and then sexuality. You know, they relied.
And also they had a better writing staff and better product towards the older days of WCW. From 98 to 2001, WCW's writing was garbage. I mean, they had Vince Russo doing Viagra on a pole matches and all this stupid, hokey, gimmicky junk. And that was the downfall. They were hell-bent on beating Vince by any means necessary, but they were not hell-bent on making a good product.
Yeah. And then Vince Russo goes to WCW and ultimately, like, single-handedly bankrupts them with the writing, and like publicly fighting with Hulk Hogan on, like, in the ring, just shooting at each other, just being absolutely honest with their disdain for each other. Like, that was just terrible TV. Let me see. TNA is legit reason why WWE had to step their game up. Yeah, I mean, I can agree. I wasn't a real big fan of the Ruthless Aggression era. I mean, there were some moments like we talked about earlier. I don't know if you were on earlier when we were talking about it. There were some bright moments in it, you know, but I wasn't a huge fan of it. I mean, it's better than the PG era, definitely in my opinion. But yeah, Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, like all those people. I mean, they eventually got Hulk Hogan. They eventually got Sting. I mean, it's basically when WCW fell, it was basically people went to TNA, and then some people went to WWE. I mean, even TNA had Kurt Angle at one point when you know he was really bad on his opiate addiction too. So. Jeff Hardy went to TNA for a little while. I mean, they all bounced around, and that's kind of
pretty much
now.
If you failed a wellness test in the WWE, you went to TNA.
Yeah. I didn't really watch a lot of TNA, to be honest. So
it was good. It was just it was what it was. It was a B show. It was something else to watch.
Yeah,
it wasn't good product. They had very good wrestlers. They just didn't have the prestige as WWE. I mean, WWE's WWE. But TNA had really good wrestling and really good characters, obviously, because now all the good wrestling and characters that was in TNA is now in WWE. But you know, they had all that talent then. So it was a great company when it was then. Now, not so much. I'm not a big fan of it anymore. But that's just because it's been TNA, Impact, Global Force. It's went through 40 different changes, and it's not what it used to
be. Aren't they teaming up with them and
AEW are going to do like a cross promotion like Ring of Honor was doing with New Japan a couple of years ago. They're going to do kind of a cross promotional thing. They're teasing that since Kenny Omega won the title Wednesday night, they're teasing that he's going to be on Impact on Tuesday with the AEW title, because Don Callis was there, which is the president or vice president of Impact Wrestling. And when Kenny Omega won it, Callis ran down the ring from commentary, and him and Omega took off in an SUV saying, we'll see you guys Tuesday night. And they're like, well, AEW Dynamite's on Wednesday. Yeah, but Impact's on Tuesday. So he's going to be on Impact on Tuesday night with the AEW title. So I see some kind of cross-promotional things going on there.
Yeah, in my opinion, though, if they transfer that title over, like if someone shocks, like if they try to go do something big and that AEW championship ends up on Impact Wrestling, AEW is done. Like
it's going to be pissed all over. Yeah. You can't have somebody from another promotion win your world championship or it be on somebody else's TV and have any kind of credibility.
Yeah, exactly.
What they're doing right now, though, is they're setting up because Moxley's about to take time off because he's having a baby.
Yeah.
So I don't know. They're trying to go with Kenny Omega. I don't know what this TNA thing's going to turn out to be, but we'll see. I hope they don't just completely piss all over it because if it does, it's going to bury Impact and AEW because we're not stupid. We can see right through stuff.
Yeah. That's, I mean, number one, it's on the good side, we're demanding the best always. And we should, as consumers of a product, we should always want the best of it. But at the same time, it's harder for us to be interested because we know so much now behind the veil. Now, granted, we don't know everything. We're not experts, but I mean, we know that it's scripted. We know, the lingo. We know how the shocking stuff happens as far as, the bleedings and, blading and how they get the blades out there. Like once they pulled back the curtains, like everything was just, it's a different thing. And instead of being shock and awe and like kind of suspending your belief, you have to really be a wrestling fan nowadays and just appreciate what they're doing in the ring. You got to appreciate the people that do great promos like Bray Wyatt and Fiend. Kevin Owens gives great promos. Even on AEW, Chris Jericho, Jon Moxley. I mean, they're all you really start to appreciate that stuff once you understand that it's not necessarily like it is organic, but it's not really who these people are. They're having to actually channel a character. And granted, it's not Oscar-worthy acting, but I mean, it's good for people that aren't actors. They're just athletes. So you get some real respect and appreciation for it after you realize how much work goes into making it feel so realistic. When actually they try to be as safe as possible, and all that stuff. So, but yeah, it was one of the, back to the Monday Night Wars in general. The next thing, we talked about all the awesome rivalries, all the cool gimmicks and all that stuff that they were doing, and they were just knocking them out of the park. Once they hit fire with it, everything was just about everything was golden. And then and then when it became real that WWE was winning and they were the top company, is that Nitro episode where Shane bought the company, he thought, and then Vince showed up through the Megatron or whatever and said that there was a McMahon on the the signature or whatever he said, but it didn't say Shane or whatever.
It says that the contract does say McMahon, but it doesn't say Vince McMahon. It says Shane McMahon.
No, switch it. It doesn't say Shane. It says Vince.
No, when Shane showed up, it's what.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
it was a shock to Shane. Yeah, never mind. I'm so sorry. I just completely. Sorry, guys. You can tell we've been on a couple week break. But yeah, that was a great storyline, and then it went into the invasion, and that was just real half-assed. That could have been something that was really good, but
if they could have got any good talent, except the only one they had was Booker T.
Yeah,
like
and
Booker T, but he couldn't carry that.
That's why Booker T was one of the first ones to go over, and he
Yeah.
had great matches with Triple H, with Stone Cold in the grocery store with the milk and stuff. That was
Price
fantastic.
check on Jackass.
But the shitty part was, and I don't blame the wrestlers for this, but they still had their guaranteed money, and WCW.
They sat at home and got their checks.
Yeah, exactly. And they had no reason to wrestle. And I can understand that after being on the road years and years and your body's hurting and stuff, and you get a chance to take a break and just count your money and just be happy. I don't blame them, but it definitely killed the WCW invasion storyline so much that they had to start putting WWE guys, and Stone Cold joined it and all that stuff. Hold on one second. Extreme Series leading from Edge and Christian. Yeah, we touched on that just a little bit earlier in the show, but yeah, we're running out of time tonight, but we'll definitely make that part. We'll make that part of one of our roundtables. Drew's got the next one, and he's already got an idea for that one. But when it comes around to the show after that, the show after next week, we can definitely touch on that for sure. That was a great time with the Hardy Boys, the Dudleys, and Edge and Christian. That was a fantastic rivalry. The ladder match where Jeff does the Swanton, the one where Jeff Hardy gets speared by Edge, the birth of the concerto, like that was fantastic. Talk about being like scared of
the 3D off the top of a ladder into a table.
Yeah, I mean that was glorious time as well. Bubba Ray power bombing Mae Young through the table.
He just like slam her and he's like just staring.
Yeah, that gimmick for a while where he was just hypnotized by putting people through tables. It was just fantastic. Yeah, we'll definitely hit on that. That was a great.
Be on one of our round tables for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, like we said, it all culminated with WWE fully buying WCW, basically clearing out the rest of the talent. A lot of people tried to jump back that didn't have as much money, like Buff Bagwell and all that stuff. But it was really watered down to the point where they had to start pulling, Kurt Angle and Stone Cold in there. And Stone Cold even said that he regrets that part, turning heel and stuff like that. If he could go back, he wouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it was needed at the point where he was about to retire, doing his last WrestleMania against The Rock. It was like a double turn or whatever. The Rock became face, Stone Cold became heel. And that really elevated The Rock. He was already starting Hollywood a little bit and things like that, so he was kind of getting preoccupied and a little stale. He still got great promos. He was still hilarious and stuff like that, but he wasn't. You could tell his focus was elsewhere, and rightfully so, because it turns out he made a great decision. He's a megastar now.
Yeah.
I'm still hoping for Roman Reigns versus The Rock at WrestleMania for head of the.
Absolutely.
That would be amazing because Rock's still in great shape. He can still do a match.
Oh yeah.
I just hope he doesn't tear his abdomen like he did versus
like he
John.
did last time doing a rock bottom.
Yeah, that was crazy. But yeah, so we're gonna wrap it. We're a little bit out of time tonight, but yeah, that's essentially our breakdown of the Monday Night Wars, like what we liked about it, what we didn't, our opinions on what made it strong for either promotion at a certain time, what made it weak, and ultimately what brought it to an end. And then we discussed a lot of side notes along the way. So
we always have side notes. That's the beauty of this.
Yeah, sidebars. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Drew's coming from us from afar. he couldn't make it tonight. But as you can see, we do have one piece of memorabilia that we got, and we're going to be doing a break or a drawing for an authenticated autographed Ric Flair boot. It's a blue boot. Ric Flair has it. It's not screen print. It's actually authenticated, certificate, and all that stuff. It's RSA certified, so it's good to go. And we're going to be doing it's like a drawing. You guys just you can pay for slots, and then we randomize and then pick a winner, and then you guys get a Ric Flair boot, whoever wins, on the cheap. The slots will probably be around $10 a spot, so buy a couple, you can get a boot potentially for like $20. But yeah, Drew made a post about it. So if you look on our page and our post history, he goes into more detail about it and how it works. And that's something that we want to try to bring to you guys more, a little bit more interaction with you guys, as far as really connecting with you, getting cool stuff like this for you. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. And if there's anything else, I know we got one request for a topic, just like that. If any of you guys have any other requests, we'll
work it in.
Yeah, for sure. Marcus, great choice. Thanks for bringing that up. It's going to be a fun time when we start talking about that for sure. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next Sunday around this same time, same channel. And we'll see what Drew's topic is for the round table. I know a couple of his choices that he's trying to decide between, and they're both pretty good. So either way, whatever he picks, it's going to be a really good topic. So just get ready for next Sunday night. We'll be on and talking about that. So again, I know I've said it a couple of times. Thanks for tuning in, and welcome back, everybody. And let's keep this holiday season going. Yeah, too sweet. All right, guys. Peace.